LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 9th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. For the 420th Sunday in a row. That's over 8 years if you do the math there. And the topic I'll be covering is Republican mythology, ? And actually I kind of wanted, it was Republican ideology or mythology. I couldn't fit the whole title into my title, but that's really what it's about. It's basically, the Republican Party isn't about ideology anymore, as I will support with many clips I'm going to show you, both the news summaries and the newsmaker clips. I'm going to show you, by the way, there's a link down in the video description to my clip list that I'm referring to here. And by looking at it, I can see that my last 5 clips, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are Republicans. Bill Cassidy, Christie, Spencer Cox, Adam Kinzinger, and Jim Banks. I quickly read from my notes. 4 of those 5 Republicans actually accept that Trump lost the election fair and square, all except Jim Banks at the end. Bill Cassidy actually voted to one of the Republican senators to vote to convict Trump in the Senate, but they all have like various responses to this switch in the Republican Party, where it's not like policies, it's not ideology, it's not low taxes, small government, no terror, free trade, strong defense. That was supposed to be the Republican Party, but now it's, do you believe that the election was stolen? Or I guess you'll see it framed as loyalty to Donald Trump, but it's basically you have to believe the big lie, and that was covered by a lot of the news analysis shows this week, because they're kicking out Liz Cheney as number 3 in the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives, replacing her with a much more liberal Republican, Elise Stefanik from New York, because she has decided that Elise Stefanik is embracing the big lie, but Liz Cheney won't. So that is the main topic, and I'll be covering it with the news summaries, with those 5 Republicans giving different perspectives on the topic. And there'll be something about COVID along the way, also about the disappointing jobs report that came out this week. That's covered in the news summaries. But I actually want to start with my political comedy clip from last night, Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live was back after several weeks, and they had a very controversial host, Elon Musk, and some people thought that it was going to be like a train wreck and terrible, and it actually wasn't. And I'm not surprised, you can't get to where Elon Musk has in the corporate world without being able to, engage an audience with a presentation. So he has to have some sort of skills in that regard. Although I did not realize that he had Asperger's syndrome, which he said that he was the first SNL host with Asperger's syndrome, or at least willing to admit it. And that kind of humanized him, and he brought his mother on for Mother's Day. Oh, happy Mother's Day out there to all the mothers, and my mom, if she's watching, happy Mother's Day. Sometimes she watches the show with my dad. But I was, the one thing that I wanted to cover from the Elon Musk monologue and his appearance on Saturday Night Live, the thing that sort of has something to do with my topic of Republican mythology, is that he was a controversial host, and even apparently some cast members didn't want to work with him because, especially here in California, he has been sort of like a mini Trump during the pandemic. He downplayed the seriousness of the pandemic, fought health regulations in his plants in Alameda County here in Northern California. I actually put a link to an article in the video description titled, it's from this Inside Hook website called the 69 Worst Elon Musk Tweets of 2020 from December of last year, and that's backing up my analysis here. But they really let Elon Musk downplay it in kind of the same way Republicans downplay it, in that he said, you know, you might find some of my tweets offensive, but not like misinformation that can actually hurt people, like Trump's downplaying of coronavirus, and also like Elon Musk's downplaying of coronavirus. So that is my long-winded introduction to a 30-second excerpt from Elon Musk's monologue, and it was a little bit quirky, but like I said, not terrible. I mean, he's not a stand-up comedian. You can see the whole thing at a link I put down in the video description, but here's the 33 seconds I wanted to talk to you in regard to my topic over here.
Look, I know I sometimes say or post strange things, but that's just how my brain works. To anyone I've offended, I just want to say, I reinvented electric cars, and I'm sending people to Mars in a rocket ship. Did you think I was also going to be a chill, normal dude?
So, yeah, that, I mean, in a way, it kind of reminds me of the Trump Republicans who say, you know, he's terrible when he tweets, but he got us conservative judges and corporate, or, you know, big tax cuts or whatever it is that Trump's supposed accomplishments are before, you know, the whole country went into a pandemic that he was not prepared to lead us through. And to support that opinion, you just have to watch my many Sunday clip roundups throughout the last year or so that, you know, he kind of like Elon Musk saying that it was going to be, Elon Musk said it was going to be over last April. That's one of the tweets you'll see in that article that's in at a link in the video description, kind of like Trump said we were all going to be back last Easter 2020, and downplayed the virus and prioritize business needs over health needs. And anyway, that is my transition into the news summaries. And as usual, NBC News's Meet the Press has the longest, best news summary. It's pretty close between NBC and ABC. They both covered this topic, my main topic. What I thought the main topic was with this Liz Cheney ouster that I described early on. I kind of want to juxtapose the ABC and NBC news coverage with this really weird coverage that comes from Fox News Sunday afterwards that is like missing what it is that Trump did wrong, like the big lie. They talk about the big lie and the stolen election. That actually comes up in the next two news summaries. Somehow it gets misplaced in the Fox News Sunday news summary that follows. So I'm going to show you all three, starting with Chuck Todd. Should I say anything more before I show this from my notes? Just like I was saying, the ouster of Cheney, surrendered to a big lie. I have other notes here, but I'll look at them while we watch the clip together, and I'll talk about it a little more after we get 4.5 minutes of NBC News Meet the Press summarizing the week for us. Happy Mother's Day, says Chuck Todd and almost all the hosts, starting here.
A good Sunday morning and a happy Mother's Day to all of the moms out there. The coming leadership ouster of Liz Cheney is about much more than the sacking of the number 3 House Republican. It is an unconditional surrender by one of our two major political parties to former President Trump and his big lie that the 2020 election was somehow stolen. Cheney's crime is not that she isn't conservative. It's that she's not conservative as defined by today's Republican Party, which apparently means unquestioning loyalty to the defeated former president. She stands accused of telling the truth, that the election was not stolen, and for criticizing Mr. Trump for inciting the January 6th Capitol insurrection. This episode is just the latest chapter in the party's purging of its legacy. The Bushes, the McCains, the Romneys, and now the Cheneys. Names that appeared on 8 of 9 presidential tickets from 1980 to 2012. All now essentially excommunicated by the party's base and leadership. And for one reason only. The message, go along with Donald Trump and his lies, or just go away. Will this help Republican election prospects in the short term? Perhaps. But what does it mean for our democracy when a great political institution refuses to accept free and fair election results and rejects its own who choose principle over party.
I have heard from members concerned about her ability to carry out the job as conference chair.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney facing a vote as soon as Wednesday to oust her from leadership after her criticism of Donald Trump's big lie that the election was stolen and his role in the Capitol attack.
We will not forget what happened on January 6th, and that the single greatest threat to our republic is a president who would put his own self-interest above the Constitution.
Cheney writing in the Washington Post this week, the question before us now is whether we will join Trump's crusade to delegitimize and undo the legal outcome of the 2020 election. House Republican leaders have answered that question.
I've had it with her. It's, I've lost confidence.
Boosting New York's Elise Stefanik, who Trump has endorsed.
My vision is to run with support from the president.
What they're saying is, if you don't go along with the big lie, you basically need to go.
Stefanik voted with President Trump just 78% of the time, criticizing his border wall, opposing him on NAFTA and trade, even voting against his signature 2017 tax cuts. Cheney voted with Trump 93% of the time. Once a Trump critic,
I think he has been insulting to women.
Stefanik became a high-profile Trump defender during his first impeachment.
When she opens that mouth, you are killing them, Elise.
Trump, meanwhile, has denounced Cheney unremittingly. This week, he called her a warmongering fool who has no business in Republican Party leadership.
The good news is, in her state, she's been censured.
All 17 Republicans who voted to impeach or convict Donald Trump have faced censure votes or formal rebukes at home. Utah Senator Mitt Romney, once the party's nominee for president, booed at a state convention last weekend, though the vote to censure him failed.
I don't hide the fact that I wasn't a fan of our last president's character issues.
Trump's big lie is also fueling efforts to restrict voting access in Republican-controlled state legislatures across the country, including Florida and Texas this week, and a hand recount of 2.1 million ballots in Maricopa County, Arizona.
There's accusations that 40,000 ballots were flown in.
To Arizona?
Into Arizona, and it was stuffed into the box, okay? And it came from the southeast part of the world, Asia, okay? And what they're doing is to find out if there's bamboo in the paper.
While Cheney still has Republican supporters,
we need to make sure as we're moving into 2022 that we don't start narrowing the tent, which is what I think this will do.
Senate Republican leaders have stopped defending her.
Do you support Liz remaining in a position of power, yes or no?
What I'm focusing on is this new administration.
In a total party surrender to Donald Trump.
I've always liked Liz Cheney, but she's made a determination that the Republican Party can't grow with President Trump. I've determined we can't grow without him.
And joining me now is Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana.
And like I said, I will have a clip of Senator Bill Cassidy since he is a senator who voted to convict Trump, and you'll see his argument. He tries to deal with this embrace of the big lie by the Republican Party as, well, but when you really talk to people and they get the facts, it helps and they change their mind. When I don't know, maybe when you meet people in person, there might be something that happens there. But I don't know. Have you ever tried to win an argument with facts on the internet, in the comment section of a YouTube video, on Twitter, on Facebook? It is a very long, hard slog with very little success, despite how strong your facts may be. But I'm pre-criticizing or pre-introducing that clip, which comes after the news summaries. That's clip number 7, and I'm only on clip number 3, which is very similar to, this is the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. A lot of the same stuff you'll see where they say that it's not about ideology. None of them use the word mythology, but they both talk about the big lie. They talk about how Liz Cheney is more conservative than Elise Stefanik, and yet it's loyalty to Donald Trump that is the big test of whether or not you're a Republican these days. And anyway, we can compare the two and talk about it a little more after we watch George Stephanopoulos with a brief introduction, and then instead of a pre-recorded package narrated by George, like what Chuck Todd did on NBC. They go to John Karl, who he should be a permanent co-host, but he's like their chief White House correspondent, I believe. Sometimes host of the show, but it's just George Stephanopoulos and Martha Raddatz that are the permanent co-hosts. For some reason, I don't understand, but what do I know about the politics of network news? Nothing, but I will talk about this news summary after we watch together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week on this Mother's Day. 6 months after the election, 4 months since the Capitol siege, American politics and government are being shaped by President Biden's policy agenda, former President Trump's personal agenda. Silenced on social media, Trump's false claims about the election are the driving force inside the Republican Party, dividing the old guard from the new, dominating its message. On the brink of losing her leadership post this week, Congresswoman Liz Cheney is warning that clinging to Trump's cult of personality will doom the GOP. But that is not the prevailing view inside the party right now. Our roundtable is here to analyze what it all means. Chief Washington correspondent John Karl starts us off.
From his gilded exile in Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump is showing Republicans he's king of the party. Exhibit 1, Liz Cheney. She's the member of Congress Trump detests the most. She said her party needed to push him aside. Now it's Liz Cheney on the verge of being pushed aside, with a vote expected this week to oust her from the House Republican leadership. Liz Cheney isn't being targeted because of some policy disagreement or because she isn't conservative enough. Heck, she voted for the Trump agenda more than 90% of the time while he was in the White House. And Elise Stefanik, Trump's hand-picked candidate to replace Cheney, is a moderate. She even voted against the Trump tax cuts, which was the signature legislative victory of the Trump presidency. But when it comes to lies about the election, Stefanik is all in. She voted to overturn Biden's electoral votes on January 6th.
I'm proud to stand up for President Trump.
And this week she appeared with Steve Bannon, the one-time Trump chief strategist who was indicted on fraud charges and pardoned by Donald Trump. Exhibit 2, the scene in Florida. Not only did Florida Republicans pass a bill inspired by Donald Trump's lies about election fraud, Governor Ron DeSantis signed it at an event sponsored by a Trump fan club named Club 45. And in a first, he did it live on Trump's favorite television show, Fox and Friends.
I'm actually going to sign it right here. It's going to take effect.
The bill puts new restrictions on voting, including voter ID requirements for mail-in ballots and new limits on ballot drop boxes. Now Texas is advancing a bill with more new restrictions on voting. Exhibit 3, Arizona, where Republicans have embarked on a bizarre quest to find evidence to prove Trump's lie the election was stolen. To conduct an audit of ballots, Arizona Republicans have hired a company called Cyber Ninjas. The company has no experience in election, but it does have an owner who has repeated wild election conspiracy theories. The group is actually testing paper ballots to see if they contain bamboo, which conspiracy theorists claim would be evidence they were snuck in from Asia. Back on Capitol Hill, Mitch McConnell has been one of the few Republican leaders willing to challenge Trump's election lies. Now he says he is focused on something else, stopping all things Biden.
100% of my focus is on stopping this new administration.
As for President Biden,
I think the Republicans are further away from trying to figure out who they are and what they stand for than I thought they would be at this point.
Or maybe they have figured it out. The grand old party is, after all that has gone down, the party of Trump.
Thanks to John Karl for that. Let's talk about it on our roundtable, joined by Christie, Rahm Emanuel, the CEO of Democracy for America, Bette Simpson, and Jane Coaston, host of the New York Times podcast, The Argument. Chris, let me be.
And I'll have a little bit of that Jane Coaston. I normally don't show pundits, but they didn't really have any Republicans talking about this split in the Republican Party on This Week with George Stephanopoulos other than Christie. So I'll mainly have Christie. I'm going to edit out and some of Rahm Emanuel, his response. And, you know, they're like super pundits, I guess, because Christie was also governor of New Jersey and Rahm Emanuel was mayor of Chicago and chief of staff in the Obama administration. So they're not just journalists or pundits, but they also had like real government jobs. Well, even George Stephanopoulos, to that extent, also had a real government job in the past. But So I'll leave a little bit of the Joan Coaston, I think her name is, who does the New York Times podcast, just because you'll see Rahm Emanuel and Christie refer to some of the things she said. And they, I mean, it's not a good situation for the Republican Party. You know, I talked about whether Republicans are crazy, you know, how the Republican Party was splitting while Democrats were uniting in the last several weeks in the titles of my Sunday live clip roundup. And I saw people talking about the bamboo ballots that covered in both those last two news summaries. And you would think, since Fox News has so many great sources in the Republican Party, you know, being a propaganda outlet of the Republican Party, that they would be able to report on this split better than they do in this news summary. Now, part of the bias here is they have Michael McConnell on. I think his first name was Michael. Yeah, Michael McConnell, who a former judge who was on the Facebook panel that came out with its decision on Wednesday regarding Trump's suspension from Facebook. They decided to continue it for another 6 months, but that it couldn't be indefinite because Facebook has no rules that allow for indefinite suspensions, and so they have to come up with more clear rules and then apply them. And but the thing is, the reason that Trump got suspended from Facebook was because he told this big lie over and over again about the election being stolen from him. And whether you think he's like criminally responsible for inciting a riot, he definitely encouraged people with his big lie and with other comments, and even on the day of January 6th. And you'll see they never talk about that in the news summary. This is what I was saying earlier. Never do they even mention why he was suspended from Facebook. They don't mention the big lie. They don't mention the stolen election. They don't mention the January 6th insurrection. There's like a brief reference to like misinformation with this clip from Jen Psaki and spam and conspiracy theories from this in the Congressional Intelligence Committee or Senate Intelligence Committee. But they go through this entire news summary without ever mentioning what it is that Trump did wrong. Now, the news bias I was talking about, where when they have Michael McConnell on from the Facebook board, so this whole news summary is geared towards their exclusive guest, and that happens on all the news programs, not just Fox News Sunday. It's this weird bias that the news programs have. If they have an exclusive guest, then news having to do with that guest is all of a sudden much more important. And so it's all through the lens of Trump's expulsion from Facebook. But notice the bias here. I got to the end of it and I'm like, what? They got through all of that and never explained why Trump got kicked off Facebook. And then I let it keep running till Chris Wallace starts his interview with Michael McConnell. I don't have a clip of that because it doesn't really fit my topic. But he sort of plays what Trump did, but never really says big lie or... well, anyway, I've over-introduced this. I will talk about it a little more after we watch that 3.5-minute news summary from Fox News Sunday this morning over here.
Hello again, and happy Mother's Day from Fox News in Washington. Donald Trump's influence on the Republican Party is being challenged on two fronts right now. First, in Congress, where House Republicans are moving to replace Liz Cheney as one of their leaders over her split with the former president. And on social media, where Facebook's decision to ban Mr. Trump from its platform, which it must now reconsider, could play a big role in another possible run for president in 2024. In a moment, we'll speak with former federal judge Michael McConnell, one of the co-chairs of Facebook's oversight board. But first, let's bring in Mike Emanuel with more on where the Trump-Facebook controversy stands right now. Mike.
Chris, the Facebook Oversight Board's decision to uphold the ban on former President Trump for now has led to calls to break up big tech platforms, with some arguing for antitrust reform after allegations of censoring conservatives.
This is going to be a breakup of big tech. You know, when you look at Google and Facebook, they have more power over what we read and what we see than any in the media.
There's also significant concern from those close to former President Trump that being shut out by Facebook and Twitter could severely impact his fundraising power and ability to reach his base. In fact, the Trump re-election campaign devoted a 9-figure budget to Facebook. As for President Biden,
the president's view is that the major platforms have a responsibility related to the health and safety of all Americans to stop amplifying untrustworthy content, disinformation and misinformation.
In Congress, there's at least some bipartisan support for big tech reform, with some on the left pushing for Section 230 reform to cut down on spam and conspiracy theorists. The Democratic chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee says failure is not an option.
I've been urging these reforms and have not been able to get them across the finish line.
There are calls for social media giants to be consistent and transparent in enforcing their rules. There's also the big picture constitutional issue regarding First Amendment speech. Chris?
Mike, thank you. And joining us now, one of the co-chairs of Facebook's Oversight Board, former federal judge, Michael McConnell. Professor, let's start with Facebook's original decision to ban President Trump based on 2 of his posts on the day of the Capitol riot. First, there was this.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens.
Later that same day, Mr. Trump posted this. These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously, viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly, unfairly treated for so long. Professor, your board decided to uphold the ban for 6 months while Facebook clarifies its policy. Why did you decide to enforce the ban or to continue the ban during that period rather than to lift it?
And Michael McConnell then goes on to talk about how Trump instigated or supported violence and praised people who were engaging in violence while they were engaging in violence, and the misinformation, and then talked about the whole Facebook decision and explained why it wasn't really a First Amendment issue because of, the First Amendment only applies when the government takes away your free speech, although there are some other ways where you can enforce like speech neutrality rules in private property, like here in California, under the California Constitution, we do in shopping malls that are privately owned, and that is a concept that the Supreme Court says could be constitutional. Oh, what is going on over there? There's while I'm talking, I'm going to take a picture of Sandy and Dash. This is a bonus Dash and Sandy clip to see what I have to put up with here. I know they're the... oh, I guess I probably should have kept going. They're still right there. I'm trying to give you an instant... See, I should have like a Sandy and Dash cam, but anyway, here's what I was just looking at there. While I'm talking, I'm going to take a picture of Sandy and Dash. This is a bonus Dash and Sandy. So, but now they're like both. Oh, and there goes Dash. So I guess Sandy is taking over Dash's position. But I don't know why they have to bug me. This is a very small space. I don't know why they have to like congregate right here. I guess they just enjoy the show. They just enjoy the show. Can you blame them? Anyway, I think I kind of explained that whole thing. I was going off on a tangent about the Facebook decision, but if you want to see the rest of Michael McConnell's interview, there's a link down in the video description to all of Fox News Sunday. But now I want to get to CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper covered more stuff. He covered the big lie that you didn't hear about in that last news summary. He covered COVID. He covered the disappointing job numbers, and even the Chinese space junk that we were all waiting last night to see whether it we got the 1 in a trillion chance of it landing on our head. I think it landed in the ocean near the Maldives. Is that right? But anyway, apparently Jake Tapper was the State of our Union this week was being grateful not to be hit in the head with space junk over in this clip.
Hello and happy Mother's Day. I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is grateful that falling space junk decided to spare us. This week, President Biden is trying to turn bad news into momentum. The White House says a disappointing jobs report is a clear sign that Congress needs to move forward and quickly on Biden's $4 trillion infrastructure and families plans. This week, the president will host a group of Republican senators for negotiations, even as the jobs news has some Republican governors undoing a key part of Biden's COVID response package, those extra $300 federal unemployment benefits, which many Republicans view as a possible disincentive for folks to rejoin the workplace. Meanwhile, House Republicans appear focused elsewhere. This week, they're set to purge Congresswoman Liz Cheney from her role in party leadership because Cheney has repeatedly objected to former President Trump's big lie, the lie that so many of her colleagues are embracing. There is encouraging news on one front, the battle to contain coronavirus in the United States. The U.S. now reporting a number of record lows, the average number of new daily cases and hospitalizations and deaths, all of those numbers falling to levels we have not seen since last year, as health experts raise expectations for a more normal summer. But one big caveat, the pace of COVID vaccinations is falling across the country, too, as the White House tries to convince hesitant Americans to protect themselves. Joining me now, the White House COVID response coordinator, Jeffrey Zients. Jeffrey, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Sometimes, is that evidence that we're all living in a simulation, that the guy who now has the job, Deborah Birx's old job, the head of the COVID task force, that his name is Jeff Zients? Doesn't that seem like the activity of a ironic narrator or ironic author up there? I don't know. You can let me know what you think. But I don't have a clip of Jeffrey Zients, although that was a good interview. Like I said, I have 5 Republicans plus Rahm Emanuel and a little bit of what was her name, Jane I can't remember her. I'll look it up before we get to it. But wasn't that news summary less than half the length of the Fox News Sunday news summary? So much better in terms of summarizing all the important. It not only got the whole Liz Cheney, Elise Stefanik big lie, Trump Republican loyalty test story. It talked about COVID. It talked about the disappointing jobs numbers and how the Biden administration is trying to use it to gain momentum for their increased spending, while Republicans claim it's the too much unemployment benefits are stopping people from going to work. Although if you look at and I'm not going to really cover that, but I wanted to talk about it briefly, and it does come up in the CBS Face the Nation news summary that's even shorter. I'm going to show you in a sec. But if you look at the actual job numbers, and several people said don't go by just 1 month, but they were basically like 280,000 jobs, and they were expecting like 1 million jobs, and Republicans are saying it's because people are getting paid too much to stay home. But actually, to get unemployment benefits, you have to prove that you're like actively looking for work, and I don't even know if you can turn down job offers. That I'm not sure about. They talk about restaurants, and Fox News has like all week been playing like restaurant owners. My employees won't come back to work because the government's paying them too much to stay home and watch Netflix and chill or whatever. But actually, the restaurant and leisure industry had the most job growth in this bad jobs report. So that was the little analysis I wanted to add on to that clip. But this next news summary, CBS News Face the Nation, John Dickerson, he went like right to Dr. Scott Gottlieb. They had some news summaries later in the show that I'm not going to take, especially about COVID in India, and they did a lot of good COVID coverage. As CBS, I sometimes say, should be the COVID broadcasting system, because they had the earliest and best coverage of the coronavirus pandemic going back to like February 2020, and but not much of a news summary today, and I'll talk about it a little more after we watch together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Margaret is on maternity leave. The country appears to finally be turning the corner on the pandemic, and there is good news to report. 1/3 of American adults have been fully vaccinated. Children between 12 and 16 will likely be able to receive the Pfizer vaccine soon. And there are drops in every way we measure the virus: new cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. But we're still having trouble rounding the bend with the economy, as that disappointing jobs report made for sobering headlines Saturday, and reminded us that the road to recovery is going to be a long and winding one. And we've got a lot to get to today, and we're going to begin with former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb.
And if you want to watch Dr. Scott Gottlieb or pretty much any part of CBS News Face the Nation, the link down in the video description goes to the Face the Nation YouTube page, where pretty much the entire program is split into segments, including the interview with Dr. Scott Gottlieb. So you can check that out if you're interested in it. But that is all the news summaries, and you can let me know down in the comment section what you think of the 5 different ways the 5 different news programs began summarizing what happened this last week. And now I'm going to take 5 newsmaker clips, the 5 Republicans I promised you before, starting with NBC News' Meet the Press, where I have a clip of Chuck Todd talking to Senator Bill Cassidy, one of the 4 of the 5 5 Republicans. That's what's really interesting about the 5 Republicans. These are, I think, all 5 of the Republicans who were on the Sunday morning news analysis shows, and 4 of them actually will tell you Trump won Trump lost the election, fair and square, that there wasn't fraud or whatever. And Bill Cassidy, this senator from Louisiana, even voted to convict Trump. There's this representative Jim Banks at the end who still thinks that there were irregularities and fraud, and I'll get to that when I get to that. But like I said earlier in the program, what is kind of ridiculous about Senator Bill Cassidy is he's telling Chuck Todd that, once you give people the facts, they come around. That's the solution to this embrace of the big lie by the Republican Party. And is he really that naive, or do you think it's just something to say to get through this patch of history? You can let me know what you think watching Chuck Todd get that answer from Bill Cassidy, senator from Louisiana, over here.
And joining me now is Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. He's, of course, one of the 7 Republicans who voted to convict President Trump during his 2nd impeachment trial earlier this year. Senator Cassidy, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Thank you, Chuck. Good to be with you.
I want to start, Congressman Anthony Gonzalez, one of the Republican House members who voted to impeach, was censured by the Ohio Republican Party this week and called a traitor by a candidate for the U.S. Senate that hopes to be your colleague in 2023 in the United States Senate, Josh Mandel. Can you explain the fervor that seems to be inside this party to punish people like yourself and anybody that crossed the president here?
What I have found that there's a lot of misinformation out there, that when you listen to people, they know you're listening, and then you present kind of the other side, you get people who are least neutral, but oftentimes, I didn't know that, and they'll agree with you. For example, if I'm asked about voter fraud, I point out that Giuliani, under oath, said there was no fraud. And now, outside the courtroom, he says stop the steal, but inside he says there was no fraud. I point out that Sidney Powell, in March, said that no reasonable person would have believed what she had said. No reasonable person, she's playing people for a sap. And so once they hear that, that kind of gives them a gut check. So when you go through those facts and others that I could list, then there's a reconsideration. I'm confident that that process will continue.
How should that process continue? Because as you saw in our opening piece there, look, more elected Republicans, and I'm leaving you out of this because when you're asked, you address the issue. But a lot of Republicans have chosen not to. Right? They've chosen to say, in the face of these Trump conspiracy theories, they just want to, I'm not looking backwards, I'm looking forwards. Is that a mistake?
I can't speak for other people, but I do find being honest with the American people always works. And if you give them the facts, they will flip their mind. If they ask about the constitutionality of the impeachment proceedings, I just say watch the YouTube of the first day of the impeachment, and you will come away convinced that it was constitutional. And so the more you hit that, these are good Americans. The more they do their investigation, the more they will come to understand it, I think, as at least that it's reasonable to hold the position as Representative Cheney, and that's our process of getting to a better place.
Do you still? So what do you think? Do you buy it? Do you think that the Bill Cassidy approach, if you just go to the 70% of Republicans who believe that Biden stole the election and you give them facts like Giuliani says in court that there was no fraud, even though outside of court he says that there was, or that the other lawyer for Trump said no one, when she was sued by the Dominion voting, Sidney Powell, that's her name. Sidney Powell, when sued by Dominion voting systems, said, "Oh, nobody would believe anything I said," like in the aftermath of the election. And you think those facts are actually gonna? I mean, they don't know those things, or I don't know. I just don't buy Bill Cassidy's argument, and this next approach is not the Bill Cassidy approach. This is the Chris Christie approach is instead to basically ignore, like try to pretend the big lie, talk about anything else except for the big lie and the stolen election. Say, nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about that. That's not important. And you'll see he even gets laughed at when he talks at the beginning of this answer, talking to George Stephanopoulos at the end of his first answer in this clip. He says, well, Elise Stefanik is actually more moderate than Liz Cheney, so in the leadership, and she's in a swing district in New York, so it'll be better for Republicans that she's our messenger on, because she is more moderate on policy, and he uses the word policy, and George Stephanopoulos points it out, and they all laugh, ha 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 ha, because it's not about ideology, it's about the mythology, it's about the big lie, the loyalty to Trump, and the the ability to say, you have to say you see the 5 lights for the Captain Picard being tortured by Cardassian fans out there. What was the name of that episode? Maybe someone can tell me that's a great episode, or you have to be able to say 2 + 2 = 5 or whatever for the non-Star Trek fans out there. And then Rahm Emanuel kind of calls him on it, and then there's this brief, I've edited out most of this Jane, see, I said I was going to check, and I did, now I can't, Jane, for some reason I can't remember her name, Jane Coaston from the New York Times, because they're, Jane Coaston and the Yvette Simpson, they're really just pundits, but Christie and Rahm Emanuel, they're like super pundits because they're also like politicians, and maybe even with futures. Some people say Christie may be trying to pick up the pieces of the Republican Party, so see if you think his approach is more successful than the Bill Cassidy, well, we'll use facts. He's like, we'll ignore that there is a problem and try to talk about everything but the problem over in this clip.
Joined by Christie, Rahm Emanuel, the CEO of Democracy for America, Yvette Simpson, and Jane Coaston, host of the New York Times podcast, The Argument. Chris, let me begin with you. In that statement, Biden also said he didn't really understand. He's mystified by what the Republican Party is going through. So try to explain it right now. You spoke out against the idea that the election was stolen from the very beginning, but that view seems to be taking more hold every single day.
Look, I don't think it is taking more hold every single day, George. You're talking about the same people talking about the same thing.
70% of Republicans don't think
over and over. Well, listen, all I can tell you is that the people that I talk to are not in that camp and want to move on. And they want to talk about what we need to do next in the country. And actually, if you look at this, absent the atmospherics that everybody wants to talk about regarding Donald Trump, Elise Stefanik, as John said in his piece, comes from a swing district in New York State that President Obama won twice by double digits. and then President Trump won twice by double digits. So she comes from a place where it's much more likely that she'll bring a much more moderating voice on policy into that caucus leadership than what Liz Cheney did, who voted 90% of the time with Donald Trump. So
you have the right qualifier there, though, on policy.
Well, George, of course, I say my words very carefully. Okay, that's what you guys pay me to do here, right? Is to say it the right way, and that's what she'll do. And I've known Elise. I campaigned for Elise in her first campaign. She was the youngest woman elected to the House of Representatives, and I think Elise will bring some real good things to it. I also like Liz Cheney, and I think Liz is smart and tough, but I think Liz is doing what she wants to do. I don't think Liz wants to be in leadership anymore, because once she won the vote earlier, she continued to press this issue publicly in a way that was antagonizing the people who were against her. And I think you don't have an entitlement to be in leadership, but you do have an entitlement to be in Congress.
Jane Coaston, a lot of Democrats.
The base in Arizona is the one looking for bamboo threads in voting because apparently pandas are in charge of this election. I think that it's important to say that this is not what conservatism writ large looks like. This is what Trumpism at large looks like. And
By the way, I don't disagree with one thing you just said. Okay, but the point is, there's not an entitlement to being in leadership, and I think Liz, through what she's been doing now in the last couple weeks after she won the first vote, is sending a clear signal. She's not comfortable in this leadership anymore, and she doesn't want to be in it. She hasn't made any calls.
Donald Trump's the one calling her a warmonger, which again, if he cared about that, why would he be supporting Lindsey Graham?
The question, Rahm Emanuel, is Lindsey Graham right or is Liz Cheney right? Is it necessary to stick by Donald Trump here, or is it important for the future of the Republican Party for them to move on?
Well, a couple of things. Jane has said the word, conservative or agenda. First of all, this is not a conservative party. You want to look at a conservative party, pick up John Boehner's book, pick up former President Bush's book. That's conservative. This is a reactionary party built on both resentment and race. That is what the party's going. Second, the other piece of this is, you talk about an agenda. In 2020, there was no platform. There's no agenda. It's about Donald Trump. Parties exist for two reasons. Set out a set of policy principles. They didn't have that in 2020. They still don't have that. Number two, to win elections. It took 90 years to find a president that could both lose the White House, the House, and the Senate, and Donald Trump did that. This is about Donald Trump and his grievances. And the other piece of this that makes no sense to me, you have an election. There are three things that both parties have. The Republicans have redistricting. They have basically restricting voter access, and they are going to also have the ability in this area to cut off any part of history they have. Democrats have an economy, a president with a job approval that's above 50%, but in the midterms that has not happened. And then the third piece on that, they have a popular agenda where a quarter of the Republicans are supporting. In the last election, Joe Biden took 10% of the Republican Party. This is not good for swing voters.
But if
you have Matt Gaetz is being investigated for trafficking in underage women. You have accusations about a congressman from North Carolina what he did in college and lied about his resume. You have accusations of a congresswoman from Illinois who praised what Hitler did in the Holocaust. They are staying in the caucus. They are staying on committees. But if you speak up against Donald Trump and you say, Joe Biden won the election, you are thrown out of this party.
And especially with that last part, I think Rahm Emanuel won that argument with Christie that because it's not, all about not all about policy. It's not moving to the future. It's about loyalty to Trump. And the thing is, you saw in some of the earlier news summaries where Lindsey Graham was saying, well, Liz Cheney thinks that the Republican Party can't grow without Donald Trump, but Lindsey Graham says that he thinks the Republican Party can't grow without Donald Trump. And the thing is, I don't think Trump can grow the Republican Party that much, but he does really have the power to destroy it because he's got to help the Republicans win the House in 2020. And one thing Rahm Emanuel was, 2022. And one of the things Rahm Emanuel was talking about, and before I go on, I did want to thank Tesla Ranger for giving me the answer to the name of that Star Trek Next Generation episode. It was actually a two-part episode, Chain of Command. where Jean-Luc Picard is tortured by a Cardassian. I think that Cardassian played Jack the Ripper in the movie Time After Time about H.G. Wells going back to San Francisco. And check me on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. And thank you, Lulu Girl, for thanking me for my show with a Super Chat contribution. I always, the tops off my Sunday just like a cherry. So I appreciate that Super Chat contribution. I always appreciate the support, financial support of Super Chat live viewers, and there are links down in the video description to become a patron on Patreon or give a direct contribution on PayPal. There's also that join button for YouTube people to become a YouTube member. But I digress. I now wanted to finish up what I was saying. Oh, Lindsey Graham saying that the Republican Party can't grow without Trump. I don't think it's going to grow either way, but I think Trump could destroy the Republican Party because he needs the Republicans need the support of Trump to take back the House in 2022. Rahm Emanuel was talking about some of the things that are in Republicans' favor. You know, there's the census was just completed, and several Republican states gained seats, and then there's redistricting. Every 10 years, we split up the seats and redraw the districts in all the states, and a lot of states are controlled by Republicans, and there's only like an 8-seat majority by Democrats right now, and just through redistricting and the census, Republicans are looking like they're going to take over the House. Not so much the Senate, but so even with this incredible focus on a big lie, there's a good chance the Republicans will still take back the House of Representatives in 2022. But if Trump decides to destroy the party between now and then because they displease the king of the Republican Party, well, that's one of the best chances the Democrats have of keeping the House in 2022. Anyway, so now I want to move on to my next Republican, though. This is Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah. You remember last week I showed the clip of Mitt Romney getting booed in Utah because, like I said, 70% of Republicans think that the election was stolen from Trump, and so there's a lot of animosity to Mitt Romney, who's one of the leading Republicans who voted for conviction. And you'll see this governor of Utah is kind of on Mitt Romney's side, and he doesn't have the Christie pretend it doesn't exist strategy, or the Bill Cassidy we'll give them the facts and that's going to help strategy. It's more like we need a diversity of voices and then we'll all come together, I guess. I don't know. I've watched this clip a couple times. I'll come up with my final opinion on it while I see what you all say about it, and I watch it for the third time. And first time for you, third time for me. Jake Tapper talking to Spencer Cox, the Republican governor of Utah, and you'll see he even follows up showing the Mitt Romney getting booed clip over here.
House Republicans meet on Wednesday. They're going to likely vote to oust Republican Conference Chair Congresswoman Liz Cheney for pushing against former President Trump's false claims about the election. She is more conservative, pardon me, than the woman who will likely replace her, Elise Stefanik. She voted with Trump more reliably than Stefanik did. What does it say about your party that House Republicans are planning to remove Liz Cheney because she won't tell the big election lie?
Well, it shows that we're very divided as a party, and that's no secret. I'm not the first person to say that. But as we talk about broadening the tent and bringing in a new generation of Republicans, we really have to allow for those types of differences. We're seeing that here in Utah. This is playing out everywhere. You referenced the convention that took place last week. I think what's remarkable, and you did hear that clip of the boos, and Senator Romney certainly got the brunt of that. But the resolution to censure sponsor him actually failed. And that was with, again, a small number of delegates, theoretically the most passionate and maybe extreme number of delegates. But the truth is that we believe here in Utah that there is room in the party for both Senator Mitt Romney and Senator Mike Lee. And they're working together on some really important legislation. And I hope there's room in the party for all of those voices.
You know, it's interesting, though, because you're not talking about differences on, say, taxation or whether or not we should have troops in Afghanistan after September. You're talking about differences about a fact that one group of people is refusing to accept and the other group of people is saying, like Mitt Romney and like you, Joe Biden won the election. Now, Republicans at your convention, you know, erupted into these boos against Romney, who, as you know, has been a lifelong Republican. And I'm just wondering, well, let's take a listen. I want to play that clip.
Now, you know me as a person who says what he thinks, and I don't hide the fact that I wasn't a fan of our last president's character issues. And I'm also no fan. Aren't you embarrassed? Oh, yeah, you can boo all you like.
You even got booed yourself. And I guess, first of all, how did it feel? And why do you think they were booing you?
Well, you didn't play the clip from my speech. It was there were just a few scattered kind of boos, and that specifically was around when I was talking about our pandemic response, and I think that this past year has been really tough on people. There's no question about that, and has certainly heightened those passions and that divisiveness. But I've said for a long time that one of the problems in our country is that politics has become a religion, and when you talk about the previous piece of that, of course, what Senator Romney was going through and the conversations there. I'm more interested in figuring out kind of how we got here and how we move out of that. You know, how did President Trump get elected in the first place? Because I think that was a surprise to a lot of people. And I think we do ourselves a disservice as a party if we don't try, and as a country, if we don't try to get at the heart of what is driving people to believe things that aren't true. What is it that's happening out there that has led us to this point, and then how do we counter that? How do we change that? Why is it that people are latching on, you know, around the pandemic too, latching on to conspiracies, and what is it that's driving us apart? And that's what we're trying to do differently here in Utah.
So I asked Congressman Adam Kinzinger, a Republican from Illinois.
And Adam Kinzinger, that's going to be the next clip. But what do you think of Spencer Cox there, the governor of Utah, who I'd never heard of before today, honestly. And I'm quite the political junkie. I'm not sure where he came from, but I haven't seen him on any, he's certainly not been on any of the Sunday morning news analysis shows in the 8 years I've been doing my live stream, and I don't know where exactly, I don't really know anything about him. But he seems to have, at least he's like one step beyond Christie, who won't even recognize that there is a problem. You know, we're just not talking about that, we're moving forward or whatever. And then he's even a step beyond Bill Cassidy, the Republican before, who's like, you know, once we get them the facts, that's going to help. But no, he realizes that there are people who are just not being reached by facts. You know, why do we have this problem with conspiracy theories and craziness? And he talks about like politics being like a religion or whatever. But I want to move on to the next clip. This actually is a Republican who's set up a website. You'll hear him actually say his website before the end of this clip. And he comes up with some really colorful language. There's a great metaphor in Adam Kinzinger's remarks about the Republican Party and Donald Trump, where he I don't know, it's not exactly, he doesn't exactly compare him to Billy Zane, where, you know, that scene where Billy Zane like finds like a child alone crying, picks him up and uses him. He's like, I have a child to get on the lifeboat. He has no one in the world but me, and I hadn't really thought of Trump and then in this metaphor, by the way, the Republican Party is the Titanic. So kudos to Adam Kinzinger for that, and I won't ruin any more of it. This is actually, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, they're, maybe Christie, are vying to be leaders of the post-Trump Republican Party, if such a thing even happens. I've seen him say some deplorable things over the years, but I've also seen him say some reasonable things. When he also cites Jesus, and I was talking about like politics as a religion. Well, the problem is that, religion isn't, most religion anyway, certainly not the New Testament Christianity isn't really based on facts. It's based on faith, which is kind of the problem to begin with. If I were to tell Spencer Cox in that last clip, two things I would say, three things: Fox News, the social media, and religion are three things that make it a lot easier for people to believe in things that don't have scientific, empirical evidence supporting them. And I will talk about that a little more after we see Adam Kinzinger take the right position, but maybe not for the right reasons, talking to John Dickerson on CBS News' Face the Nation this morning over here.
Former President Trump continues to be the central figure in the ongoing drama over the future of the Republican Party. This week, House Republicans are expected to remove Congresswoman Liz Cheney from her leadership position. She's been consistently critical of Mr. Trump for perpetuating the lie that the election had been stolen from him and inciting the riots on January 6th. Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger is one of the few Republican members supporting Cheney and joins us from his district in Illinois. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. How are you?
Before we get to the Republican Party, I want to ask you about Colonial Pipeline. You are on the Energy and Commerce Committee. What do you know about this attack, and how important is it?
It's really important in terms of, understanding the role that cyber is playing in the future. Things like critical infrastructure, energy. I don't know much more than what you all know. Maybe I will this week when I get back to D.C., but this needs to redouble our efforts as a country to get past our internal divisions as the end-all be-all of everything and focus on things like critical infrastructure in the future, because this is only going to continue to happen more often if we're not careful.
Speaking of internal divisions, the Republican Party in the House, it looks like Liz Cheney, the number 3 in House leadership on the Republican side, is no longer going to hold that position. What is this debate about?
Yeah, look, it's incredible. So Liz Cheney is saying exactly what Kevin McCarthy said the day of the insurrection. She's just consistently been saying it. And a few weeks later, Kevin McCarthy changed to attacking other people. And so I think what the reality is as a party, we have to have an internal look and a full accounting as to what led to January 6th. I mean, right now it's basically the Titanic. We're like, in the middle of this slow sink, we have a band playing on the deck telling everybody it's fine. And meanwhile, as I've said, Donald Trump's running around trying to find women's clothing and get on the first lifeboat. And I think there's a few of us that are just saying, guys, this is not good, not just for the future of the party, but this is not good for the future of this country. We're 4 months after January 6th, an insurrection, something that was unthinkable in this country. And the message from the people that want to get rid of Liz Cheney is to say, it's just time to focus on the future and move on. Like this was 10 years ago, and we've been obsessed about it since. It's been 4 months, and we have so many people, including our leadership in the party, that has not admitted that this is what it is, which was an insurrection led by the President of the United States, well deserving of a full accounting from Republicans.
But if you are a leader of a party and 70% of the members of your party think the last election was stolen, though they're wrong about that, you're a leader of that party. You can't change the party you're the leader of. So why should a person be a leader of a party that is fundamentally at odds with what Liz Cheney believes?
Because truth matters. Right now, and we have to look and understand why. Yes, 70% of the base believes that the election was stolen because they've been told it was. They've been told by the President of the United States. They've been told in many cases by Republican leaders, or at least Republican leaders in the least have not countered it on something so vastly crazy as the election is stolen. You know, and this is why you have this real battle right now in the party. This idea of let's just put our differences aside and be unified. You cannot unify truth with lies. The lie is that the election was stolen. The truth is Joe Biden beat Donald Trump, and I'm sorry that 74 million people voted for Donald Trump. They weren't disenfranchised, they were simply outnumbered. And as a party, let's focus on now, how do we go out and win more people? And that's why actually I started the Country First movement at country1st.com, is just to say, tell people the truth and quit peddling in conspiracies, because that's what we've seen in this party. And they're going to get rid of Liz Cheney, because they'd much rather pretend that the conspiracy is either real or not confront it than to actually confront it and maybe have to take the temporary licks to save this party in the long term, this country.
Speaking of outnumbered, though, you and Liz Cheney and maybe Mitt Romney in the Senate are outnumbered by the current Republican Party. It is Donald Trump's Republican Party. The numbers are on their side. So why stay in it?
Well, look, I was a Republican far longer than Donald Trump, and I'm only 43 years old. He became a Republican just a few years ago and tried to change the whole definition of conservatism. So I think it's worth a fight. But, you know, the reality is, over time, we're going to see who wins this battle. And then there'll be a lot of decisions to make everywhere as we see parties realign and change. For me, I'm a conservative. I'm going to fight for the soul of this party. And but every member, not just you know, leadership, every congressman, every state representative, every member of the party that pulls a ballot in the primary has to decide, are we going to exist on lies or are we going to exist on truth? And to everybody that grew up in Sunday school like me, that thinks somehow accepting a lie is okay because maybe we can win the bigger battles, I got to tell you, the Christ I follow, the Jesus I know, never says anything about it's okay to lie to the people as long as the end state is the same. Truth matters, and that's what this party has to come to grips with, no matter the cost.
Well, you really got to respect that part. I mean, the Jesus-y part is not for me, but the, you know, truth matters, and the truth, and that message for Republicans, since there's a high percentage of evangelical Christians in the Republican Party. I mean, I think Adam Kinzinger's message is the most effective of all the four. He's the fourth of the four Republicans who will actually say that Biden won the election fair and square. It wasn't stolen by Donald Trump. Christie says that. Bill Cassidy, who voted to convict Trump in the Senate, says that. Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, says that. But they all have these like weird responses where they try to embrace the lie, or the people who accept the lie, or just ignore the lie, or say, you know, if we give them a few facts, they'll come around, or Spencer Cox we have to find, you know, why is it people are so susceptible, recognize the problem, but it was only Adam Kinzinger there who said, no, we have to reject the lie. That is the only solution for the Republican Party. I'm not a Republican, and why would any Republican take my advice? But if the Republican Party is going to have a future and not just be the Trump party of conspiracy theories, that I would accept the Kinzinger approach, or say that is the best approach. You can tell me, are there any... people say the trolls are... I saw somebody say the trolls are here. Does that mean I have actual Republicans? Republicans are only like 25% of the U.S. Voting population. So 70% of Republicans is only 70% of 25% of the voters. So it is a dwindling part of the American political scene, and that doesn't mean they won't win back the House, as I was talking about earlier. But speaking of strange, proportional outcomes where Republicans are only 25% of the electorate, but they might win the House of Representatives, which is supposed to represent the people, but because of gerrymandering and various other things I'm not going to go into. It doesn't work out that way. But look, there's a very slim majority in the House, but Democrats in 2020, I think they got like 8% more in the popular vote for the House than Republicans did, but they still are almost 50-50. Anyway, but that's a whole other thing. But the disproportionate thing I was going to talk about, I mentioned earlier, where we find out that 70% of Republicans think that the election was stolen from Trump by Biden, but 4 out of the 5 Republicans that I can get you from the Sunday morning news analysis shows disagree with that. But I do have one, this Representative Jim Banks, because he's on Fox News, which is a home to these conspiracy theories, a home to the electoral fraud claims. It's it's a propaganda outlet of the Republican Party. Don't believe me? That's why it was created by Roger Ailes, according to this book right here, The Loudest Voice in the Room, or you can look at the hundreds of Fox News bias videos I made over my many years on YouTube, but that would be a huge digression, and instead I'm going to show you the final news clip. And Chris Wallace kind of makes up for not bringing up the big lie in the initial news summary. He does, talk about what really happened. He talks about Trump's claims. I think at one point in the program, like 40 minutes in during one of the panel discussions, Chris Wallace might have actually said the words big lie. It's not in this clip, but he does a little better in terms of cross-examining this Trump-supporting Republican as to whether he accepts Biden won the election fair and square, which he won't say no, but he has real concerns about allegations of fraud and improprieties and the way they opened up restrictions because of the pandemic, and nothing that he needs evidence for, mind you, but just enough so that he can stay on the good side of the Trump voters and not be in the category of the 4 other Republicans I showed you. And what is Sandy whining about? I'll have to go find out while we watch this last clip together. And it's a pretty long one, but I let it go because I criticized Fox News Sunday earlier for not doing what you'll see Chris Wallace do a little of here. And this is the one Republican who doesn't accept the election outcome. And he represents most Republicans, unlike the last 4 Republicans. So anyway, here it is. I'll find out what Sandy's problem is while we watch together over here.
House Republicans meet this week to decide whether to remove Liz Cheney as conference chair, the number 3 post in GOP leadership. Cheney says her party is at a turning point over former President Trump's claims of a stolen election and his role in the Capitol Hill riot. And joining us now, the head of the House GOP's biggest caucus, Indiana Congressman Jim Banks. Congressman, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Hey, Chris, good to be with you.
You are one of the Republicans leading the charge to remove Liz Cheney as chair of the Republican conference, and it looks like to replace her with Elise Stefanik, a congresswoman from upstate New York. I want to put up their voting records because it's pretty interesting. Take a look. Cheney has an 80% voting record from the conservative group Heritage Action. Stefanik's score is 48%. Cheney voted with Trump positions these last 4 years 93% of the time. Stefanik voted with Trump positions 78% of the time. If Cheney is being replaced, and she's clearly, it seems, more conservative than Stefanik, is it just because of the fact that she's not as loyal to Donald Trump?
Well, Chris, let's start with that. No, this completely misses the point about why we need a change in Republican leadership. Let me tell you, Republicans are almost completely unified in a single mission to oppose the radical, dangerous Biden agenda and win back the majority in the midterm election. And any other focus other than that is a distraction from stopping the Biden agenda from what it's already done in 3 months sending this economy in a tailspin, the crisis at the border, making America less safe abroad from appeasing those like in Iran by flirting with re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. That's our focus as a House Republican conference. And any leader who's not focused on that, on pushing back against the radical, dangerous Biden agenda, at this point needs to be replaced. But the point here is that we are almost entirely unified on that mission, except for Liz Cheney.
I understand, Congressman. What is it about Liz Cheney that isn't focusing on this mission? She opposes Joe Biden's agenda very strongly.
Well, that has not been as seen as much as most of us in the Republican conference would like to see. As you mentioned, I'm the leader of the largest conservative caucus, the Republican Study Committee. Chris, it's uncomfortable at times, but one of my jobs is to hold my Republican leadership accountable for being focused on the Republican ideals that we stand for and the single mission that we have to win back the majority. And at this point, the reason, Chris, that you and I are talking about Liz Cheney on this important program on Sunday morning is the exact evidence that she's failed in her mission as the chief spokesperson of our party. We shouldn't be talking about Liz Cheney. We should be talking about pushing back against the radical Biden agenda, and this is all a distraction from our ability to be able to do that. That's why she will likely be replaced this week. We'll sort it out. I don't know who will replace her, but that will be a discussion the House conference will have this week that we're going to take up because at this point it's necessary to do so.
I've asked you two questions, Congressman. Why are you unwilling to discuss her criticism of President Trump?
I'm not. And as a rank-and-file member of the House Republican Conference, Liz Cheney or anyone else in our conference can stay focused on other issues unrelated to us winning back the majority in the midterm election. But I know that the belief that I have, Chris, that a majority of our conference has, that she's lost focus on the single mission that we have in winning back the majority to push back against the radical Biden agenda is the reason that she needs to be replaced. But as a rank-and-file member, and make it clear to all of your viewers, Chris, that we're not kicking her out of the Republican Party if she's removed from her leadership post. But in her leadership post, any member of Congress doesn't just represent their district, they represent 212 members of the Republican conference. And right now, it's clear that she doesn't represent the views of the majority of our conference or the focus that all of us have to win back the majority.
All right, let me try to get at this a different way. Is Joe Biden the legitimate president of the United States?
Yes, Joe Biden was elected. He was inaugurated on January 20th, and he's our focus as the chairman of the Republican Study Committee. We meet on a weekly basis to counter the radical Biden agenda and push back with policies, talking points. And at this point, the Republican Study Committee is filling the void and providing our members in the House Republican Conference with what they need to push back against the Biden agenda. And that's the focus. Every day that we're focused on something else means that we're not focused on winning back the majority.
Reason I ask is I want to go back to your actions after the election in November. You joined more than 100 House Republicans supporting a Texas lawsuit to overturn the election results in other states. The Supreme Court refused to hear the case. Then you voted on January 6th to, quote, uphold the Constitution by challenging Biden victories in several states. Do you still question whether or not Joe Biden won the election fair and square and got over 270 electoral votes fair and square?
Yeah, Chris, I stand by my vote to object on January 6th. I stand by the Texas lawsuit because I have serious concerns about how the election in November was carried out. It's why I wrote a bill that's co-sponsored by nearly 100 of my colleagues to strengthen voter identification laws at the federal level and support those measures nationwide. And it's why I'm even more concerned about H.R. 1, the radical Democrat, their bill to nationalize and federalize elections, a very dangerous move forward, and that's what we should be focused on. And once again, when we're focused on beating Democrats, beating back the radical, dangerous Biden agenda, we should be focused on winning back the majority in the midterm election to save this country. And that's where most Republicans in the GOP conference are unified around that single mission and goal, and anything that distracts from it is going to hold us back from doing that.
But Congressman, you say anything that distracts from that.
And there's more to that interview, and I pretty much pre-criticized it before I showed it in terms of the stuff that Indiana Representative Jim Banks said, and Chris Wallace did kind of make up for his bias, or the bias in the news summary, by bringing up some of that stuff, although not as forcefully as the other news anchors. One thing that Jim Banks did in that last minute, that's why I kept it playing so long, is, I've seen Republicans do this thing where they want to federalize elections in terms of stopping fraud, but then they accuse Democrats of wanting to federalize elections in terms of making sure that people have the right to vote, not leaving it up to the states. But I've never seen it. So do you see in that last minute that Jim Banks first said, we want to institute a federalized program of voter ID in all the states to stop voter fraud, and then like 30 seconds later says H.R. 1 is a radical Democratic attempt to federalize elections and take it away from the states. Like, wasn't that all within that last minute? And how many times did he say, like, radical Biden agenda, radical Democrat, socialism? If you can win the election, or, like you get votes for every time you use a buzzword or whatever, it was like ding, 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 ding. Anyway, that was the final news clip. I have like food coming for dinner, but I don't want to finish the show before playing the Dash and Sandy clip, or Dandy clip for the Dash and Sandy fans out there. I did do the bonus one earlier that I took right there. They've gone off who knows where, but this morning around the food bowl, that's where I always get it's easiest to get the Dash and Sandy clips. So here's one to finish the program tonight over here. And I don't know, maybe it's my fault for giving the Dash that one piece of dog food, and right after that clip I had to like pull Dash out so that I have to make sure that Sandy gets all of her food, Sandy the dog. If I didn't watch, I have to like watch and make sure that Dash the cat does not steal the dog food right under the nose of I thought dogs got like all mean when you try to take food from them, but Sandy's just too sweet. So anyway, that is the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip. I see people are posting dog and cat emojis in the live comments, so thank you to my live viewers. I'm gonna finish up the show and go have some dinner, and I'll be back for I think 3 more Sundays, and then I'm probably gonna switch to Monday, and I'll talk about that more in the next few weeks. But and then I have a couple other videos I might make during the week, but I just never seem to have enough time. But maybe this will be the week. Who knows? Keep checking my channel like every day, and maybe something will show up. You never know. It's just a minute out of your day. But anyway, until next Sunday, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.